India has a new parliament that is for Indians, of Indians and by Indians. So what does the new parliament mean to the people of India? Joining us for a very special chat is author Amish Tripathi. Amish, thank you so much for joining us on NewsX. I begin by asking you, I'm sure you must have watched the very grand inauguration of our new Sansad. What did you really feel when you were watching the inauguration?
Bega, I certainly felt a sense of pride. What you said in your brief introduction is true, because much of the monuments that are there in Delhi, in our national capital region, the monuments that are used for governance are actually colonial era monuments, including the parliament. I'm sure you're aware the parliament was built by the British as a council for princes, and of course for their own functioning. So the parliament was inspired by the Chaussat Yogini temple, the old parliament, the Chaussat Yogini temple, the circular Chaussat Yogini temple from Madhya Pradesh. But much of the symbolism inside is actually from the British.
Right.
There's a reason why the Rajya Sabha upholstery is colored red and the Lok Sabha is colored green, because the House of Lords in the UK is colored red and the House of Commons in the UK Parliament is colored green. So actually there are deep British symbology between these behind these colors, which is what we've just adopted from the British. We needed to build our own parliament with, of course, far better infrastructure, but also our own symbology.
Absolutely. At the same time, Amish, what do you think the new parliament then really represents? What does it represent for you or for India?
It represents India. It represents all of India. The old parliament, like I said, much of the symbology. I mean, if you think about it, the red color in Rajya Sabha, which is the color of the House of Lords, the House of Lords got this red color in the 13th century because the color for the nobility in the UK of that time was red, and for royalty was purple. Those aren't the colors we used in India. The House of Commons, which is the equivalent of our Lok Sabha, used to actually sit in the chapel in the Westminster Palace, where the British Parliament is. The House of Commons building was built just 150 years ago. So before that, they used to sit in a chapel. And that chapel, the color of the upholstery was green. Why? Because at that time, the color of Christian piety in the UK was green. And they implemented these colors in India. It has very little to do with Indians. Indian Christianity doesn't use green color. And the new parliament actually reflects our tradition. So it reflects Acharya Chanakya, it represents India, the Mahajanpada stages, the Uttarpad, Dakshinpad.
Right.
It has the peacock theme and the lotus theme, which is our themes. The national bird and the national flower, respectively, of our nation. It has the Singol, which is the traditional Indian way of passing power, but not just power. It also acknowledges that a ruler or a state must run according to the rules of dharma for the good of all. This new parliament, therefore, reflects the symbology of India, of our civilization.
Absolutely.
Besides the obvious fact that it's far better infrastructure. The old parliament was frankly not fit for purpose. It wasn't even earthquake resistant anymore. Can you imagine that?
Right. Absolutely. And at the same time, Amish, we've gone from the Rajpath to the Kartavya Path. We've also built a beautiful war memorial. We've managed to install a statue of Netaji in the India Gate canopy. And now from the old parliament to the new parliament, there's a lot of construction that has been done, and rightly so, after 75 years. A lot of people feel that it's a destruction of what Delhi represented. How do we change this mindset? A lot of people still feel, oh, this was not the right thing to do. This was not the right call to make. Delhi was so beautiful and we're destroying it. How do we move forward? How do we shed this mindset that it's not destruction, but we're actually making things that are finally our own and we can take a lot of pride in?
Let's approach this from a few perspectives. One, not just the parliament, but most government buildings in Delhi were frankly not fit for purpose. They were built in the
Yes.
pre-colonial era. The parliament, enough has been written about how poor the infrastructure was out there. You only had to see a full session, a budget session perhaps, to see how tightly packed the MPs were, packed like sardines. It wasn't earthquake resistant. Many MPs did not have proper offices. The mic system, everything was almost antediluvian. But not just that. Remember, the British built Lutyens Delhi for a colonial rule, for an empire. So there was a Viceroy's palace, which got converted into Rashtrapati Bhavan. But there was no place for a prime minister because it wasn't supposed to be a democracy. There was no place for a Supreme Court justice because the Supreme Court of India was actually the Privy Council in the UK. Now, many of
Yes.
these buildings were simply not there, and they were never built. Because you can argue that maybe we didn't have the money earlier, but now we do. So first of all, the infrastructure was built for an empire, wasn't built for democracy. Many of the offices that you need were simply not there. Second thing, many of the offices that were built in the 50s, 60s, 70s when India didn't have money and regrettably had terrible design sense and architectural skills. We built those brutal Marxist box type structures. One only has to go into Shastri Bhavan, sorry, to see the sad state of the building and what our top
Absolutely.
bureaucrats worked in, leaking AC ducts, wires everywhere. I mean, anytime I went in out there, I almost felt there's a fire hazard. So we need new buildings, for more efficiency. So that's from the efficiency perspective. It is so obvious that we need it. But the second thing is even from a symbol perspective. I don't understand this point that some symbols are being destroyed. Whose symbols are being destroyed?
Right,
The
exactly.
British colonial empire's symbols they're not being destroyed. They're being updated to reflect us, no, to reflect our Indian culture. The only people who would oppose this are those who think the British colonial rule was much more noble than an Indian democracy.
And also at the same time, Amish, the fact that several opposition parties decided to not attend the inauguration, and they also called it, the PM inaugurating it, they called it the death of democracy. Do you think that was fair of the opposition parties to use such a big moment for India to actually continue a demand which they could have perhaps highlighted? They could have said that, okay, we're upset that the president did not inaugurate, but we will still be there and we will come in. Put out this united front because it was a big moment for India.
Megha, I never get drawn into politics. It would be completely incorrect of me to comment on what the opposition or the ruling party would do. But politicians, will have to, as is their nature, would focus on, what could impact the next elections. And I don't trust them that. That's their job. But we need to look at things from a wider societal perspective. Is building this parliament necessary for the efficiency of the functioning of our democracy? Yes, it is. Are new buildings needed to make our bureaucracy a lot more efficient so that they can deliver better for the government? Yes. And should our top institutions, top structures reflect Indian culture? Again, yes. Also, a part of the Central Vista project is that the North Block and South Block will actually get converted into museums. So, what are closed structures will become open to the public. This is again, a good thing. I would ideally like to see it from a positive perspective. This is something that brings the people, the Indian people, and our culture and our civilization into corridors that were representative of foreign colonial rule.
Right.
I think it's positive from a longer term perspective. I would certainly not like to, however, get drawn into the controversy of the day.
All right, fair enough.
Politicians will have to do what politicians must do, and one can't grudge them that.
But at the same time, Amish, when you think about it and you're talking about symbolism, it's not as though the parliament was, you just have a lotus theme or a peacock theme. That's not it. It doesn't end there. In fact, it begins there. The fact that every part of the parliament actually represents some part of India. You have the stonework and craftsmanship coming in from Rajasthan. You have the wood coming in from Maharashtra, marble coming from Gujarat, your carpets coming from Uttar Pradesh.
The carpet work from UP.
Yes, the bamboo from Tripura, and so many other things. As I'm speaking, I'm also trying to remember what else was there. But literally, so much has been brought in and put together to create the largest house of democracy. That in itself, like I said, is a historic moment for India.
That is true. And like I said, this is essentially, ensuring that the place where the sovereign power of the Indian people is held, which is actually the parliament, and more specifically the Raj Sabha, which represents, which is directly elected by the people, the equivalent of the House of Commons in the British Parliament. That must reflect Indian culture.
Right, absolutely. Amish Tripathi, thank you so much for joining us on the broadcast with your perspective on the launch of the new parliament.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.